Hey guys, what's going on? So today I have an album review for Putridity with Ignominious Atonement. So if you're not familiar with Putridity, they're a brutal death metal band from Italy, and basically they're one of the most extreme bands in all of brutal death metal, let alone death metal as a whole genre, in my opinion. One of the fastest, most down-tuned, most guttural, every check mark that you could think of for what makes a band brutal, this band checks off. And it's really not for everyone. Putridity is very much a love it or hate it band. If you like songs with melody and catchy choruses and easy to remember song structure, this album is not for you. But if you like ridiculously fast and excessive blast beats, super down-tuned, very chromatic guitars, really maze-like song structure, a ton of pinch harmonics, and ultra guttural vocals, then this is the album for you. This is Putridity's third album, and I believe it's the last thing they put out. This came out in 2015, and I hope they make something sometime soon, but this is the last thing we've gotten from them. And this is definitely one of their best releases. They've never put out anything bad, in my opinion. My favorite album from them at this point is probably their debut. And then on their sophomore album, which I've already reviewed, Degenerating Anthropophagical Euphoria, they really found their sound, and I think on this one, they just kind of owned it on it and took it to an even further extreme. So anyways, this was put out through Willowtip. There's the album cover. Very different looking sort of album cover for this type of brutal death metal, really. I can't really tell what the fuck it's supposed to be other than just some weird baby thing. But I like the way it looks, though. It's different, and it just has this really ugly sort of look to it that I like. But here's the back. There's 8 tracks on here. Their songs got a little longer on this album, but it's a pretty short album overall. It's about just around under half an hour, I want to say, if not half an hour. But there's 8 songs on here, and I think this might be some sort of concept album. I haven't read too heavily into the lyrics, but you've got like every 2 songs there's like a little label. Like the first 2, it's like Genesis, Metamorphosis, Martyrium, and Atonement. So maybe it's some like anti-religious shit or something. That's what it seems like. I'm not entirely sure. But there's the disc. It's just a close-up behind it. Let me show the booklet really quick. There's a neat little passage at the end of the booklet. But you just have all the lyrics in here. And then again, you have like the label, like Genesis, Metamorphosis, Martyrium, and Atonement. Oh wait, where'd it go? There we go, there's Atonement. It looks like there's some more artwork in the background, just kind of like skeletal looking type of shit. Anyways, and then here's this passage in the back. It's kind of poetic shit. It's interesting. It says, I will kick and laugh loud, I will hide for one last time, and in the end I will show up again crawling. I would have loved you, and dripping black all around me. I will shake my head, I will shake it till I smash it, until the moment they would regret of not being kind to me. Then at the bottom it says, indignation satiated from the morbid curiosity of a looking. It's the highest form of auto-commiseration, dominated by atonement. At the base of a perverse conception of decency stands a natural predisposition to cruelty that allows to mask the torment created by some sadistic entertainment. An innocent act of pure lust is necessary for the redistribution of matter at the cost of ignominious atonement. So yeah, I don't know exactly what that means, but I think it's really interesting. And I'm curious to know what it means. If there's anything you guys could think of it, let me know. But anyways, lyrically also it seems, from what I've read, they went for a little bit less of like the over-the-top gory stuff. Again, it seems like it has some sort of concept revolving around the lyrics to this album that I'm not sure entirely what it entails, but anyways, if you're already familiar with how Putridity sounds, then you should know what you're in for with this album. Production-wise, it's a lot more processed and like kind of compressed sounding compared to the previous album, Degenerating Anthropophagical Euphoria, which that album had a lot more of a... It was still very processed and modern sounding and very clean, but it had this very like loud sort of sound to it, but it still had a good dynamic range. This one doesn't have quite as much of a dynamic range to it production-wise, but it still has a really nice visceral punch to it. It's a lot more bright sounding production-wise, just really sharp. The guitars are really heavily distorted, of course, but they have like this kind of digital sort of sound to them. I don't really know how to explain it, but it sounds very processed in an almost industrial sort of way. I've heard some people compare it to. I don't really know how to explain it. The drums on this album are just blistering. I can't think of a better word to describe them. Double bass, almost non-stop. Even in parts of songs where they slow down a little bit to build up some tension, like on Obstinacy, to heal the malformed, and Mortifying Carnality. They slow down a little bit in some parts and play some more like slow, chuggy sort of riffs. Not quite slams, but just like, kind of slow chugs with some like trems in between. Just kind of slower paced stuff. Builds a lot of tension, makes it feel very tense and like really like intimidating, which is the best way I could describe Putridity's sound, honestly. It's just really like intimidating sounding, really brooding, while also being super over the top and chaotic and fast. What was I saying? But the drums are just super fast, even in the slower parts, almost non-stop blast beats, and then when they do break up, it's usually for like a groove of some sort or some sort of technical bit, but really impressive drumming. Brutal Dave is one of the best drummers in all of brutal death metal, in my opinion, just as far as sheer speed goes. He just has some really crazy blast beats. The guitar work on here is fantastic, just really like over the top, crazy fucking song structures, really maze-like and very hard to familiarize yourself with. I've listened to this album a good bit, and even now I still don't have the easiest time predicting what's going to happen next with all these songs. I'd say this is the most maze-like and hard to get into out of all three of Putridity's albums. This album just almost nothing repeats, and when it does, they change it up a lot to the point where you barely even detect that it's something that they played early in the song. There's a ton of pinch harmonics in the riffs, which that's my favorite part of Putridity's guitar work. It's just really pinchy in a very Discord sort of way. You can definitely see the influence there, but they took it to an even further extreme where there's just pinch harmonics and so many fucking riffs. I'd say my favorite song on here is probably Repugnance Enshrined in Deformity. That song has a really catchy kind of intro, and it's like the most memorable part of the album in my opinion. Vocal-wise, I can't remember the name of the vocalist of this band, but he's also in Devangelic. His vocals in Putridity are a little different. In Devangelic, his vocals are a little more discernible, but in Putridity, he just goes ultra guttural. Nothing ultra fancy technique-wise, just super low, regular sort of gutturals. Kind of devourment-y a little bit, but they're a little bit less bubbly, but they're just, really low guttural sort of vocals. Pretty meat and potatoes, but he does them very well. He also does some more kind of burbly sort of sounds here and there. He does one of those in Repugnance Enshrined in Deformity. I think he does it again in the first song on here, Conceived Through Vermination. But yeah, he just has really intense sort of vocals. The vocal patterns kind of form around the songs because the songs are so chaotic and there's not a lot of room in the songs to breathe. His vocal patterns kind of wrap around all the crazy song structures, which is really interesting. A lot of brutal death metal bands have vocals like that. Defeated Sanity is a good example of that. And Putridity excels in that vocally. Just very well thought out vocal patterns and really intense vocals, but I wouldn't say the vocals are at the forefront on this album. It's really the drums and guitar. It's just super fast and there's this big wall of sound. It's just fucking ultra brutal stuff with a ton of pinch harmonics. And it's kind of dumb fun unless you really, really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the song structure, which is personally what I like to do with this style of brutal death metal. Because on a surface level, albums like this, where it's just a shit ton of blast beats and pinch harmonics and chugs and gutturals, on a surface level to somebody, especially to somebody who's not into brutal death metal, albums like this kind of all sound the same. But when you listen to these over and over and really familiarize yourself with the complex song structures, it becomes really rewarding to listen to once you memorize kind of how the songs go. And that's something about this album that I really like. It's a very challenging sort of listen because these songs are really, really hard to familiarize yourself with, even compared to the other two Putridity albums. And it just makes it a very challenging but rewarding sort of listen over time, which is something that I really love about this style of death metal. The bass on this album is a little bit more buried in the mix. You can hear it better on the first two albums. On here, it still has that very processed, heavy sort of sound, but it's not quite as loud in the mix. It kind of blends in with the guitars and drums a little bit, especially because the production on here doesn't have quite as much of a dynamic range. It seems a little more heavily mastered, so it's a little bit more compressed. but it still does have that visceral punch that an album like this really needs production-wise. It's still very nasty sounding. But overall, while this isn't my favorite out of all three Putridity albums, there's absolutely nothing about this album I could say that's really bad. I think the production on this album could be a little bit less compressed, but it's not like overproduced or ultra clean sounding or anything. It's just very tight and like compact sounding, but it works very well for the style that they play on this album, of course, because this is Putridity at their most over the top and fast and chaotic. But anyways, if you love brutal death metal, then you will love this album, and if you're new to brutal death metal or you don't like brutal death metal, then you're probably really not going to like this album. But for people like myself, where it's like a daily listen sort of genre, my absolute favorite, then this is an album that you're going to love. I think I'd give Ignominious Atonement about an 8 out of 10. It's not perfect. It's not bad at all. But it's just a completely solid sort of release out of this ultra extreme style of brutal death metal. So basically, if you like over-the-top shit with a ton of blast beats, then you'll like this album. But that's it for this review, though. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.